Hello and welcome to Bringing Education Home. I'm Herb
And I'm Christina. Together, we share ideas to grow stronger, healthier families that are both inside.
and outside the box. If you like the show, be sure to follow Christina on Facebook.
And please leave us a like, review, or a comment on your favorite podcast platform.
Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Mr. Kyle Goodknight. With over 27 or 26 years of experience in the healthcare industry as a respiratory therapist, paramedic, and medical supply developer, Kyle has achieved notable accomplishments throughout his career. Education is his passion, reflecting in his roles as a clinical educator for the state of Ohio and a shift clinical educator at the Delaware County EMS. Kyle's certifications and educational achievements reflect his dedication to professional development and his passion for healthcare. He is driven to leave a lasting legacy by furthering the knowledge of those he can teach. Welcome, Kyle.
Wow.
This is
Did
really
I
cool to listen
I
to.
wrote that? No.
That's all really nice and high level, but tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about yourself. Tell us what you do and how you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, once again, Kyle Goodnight, full-time paramedic and healthcare professional. I've been in healthcare since 97, I think, is when I graduated. I started off in respiratory therapy and didn't even know that I wanted to be in healthcare, and went 3 years at Ohio State, go Bucks, and didn't know what to do. And my counselor was like, take this aptitude test. And so I sat down at a computer and typed in, answered questions, just generic likes, dislikes. And so they had a big list of things that, hey, you may be interested in this from your, it was almost like a job personality test, right? So I did that. And one of them on there was respiratory therapist. Had no clue what they were, no clue what they did. I applied for it at Ohio State. Ohio State only had like 15 positions. Of course, I was a regular college student. There was no way I had the right grades for Ohio to get into that program the first year. So I ended up going over to the community college. I kind of did it backwards and graduated from Columbus State in respiratory, was able to come out with the same exact job, the same exact credentials. So moved to Charlotte for a while, lived down there, working at a level 1 trauma center and critical care. And then my mom got real sick and I had to come back home, and then I worked at Ohio State again. That's what the job I came back. And then I just over the years, I worked at multiple different hospitals and in the area, and a couple of travel positions, because that's nice. A lot of very lucrative and fun to kind of go out to another city for a little bit. And then when I was in Charlotte, I got the bug to be a paramedic because they put respiratory therapist on their helicopter. Their helicopter was on top of their level 1 trauma center.
Yeah.
And they ran nurse, paramedic, and a paramedic pilot. And when I first got to Carolina's Medical Center in Charlotte, my preceptor, the person who was onboarding me, eventually, like right after he got done onboarding me, he went up to the flight team, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. I want to do that.
Yeah.
And so he's like, hey, one thing I have to do is I have to go to EMS basic school. Why don't you, since you want to do it, why don't you just come with me, do the school with me, and then you're already pre-qualified, and whenever time they have another opening. So I did that, kind of got the EMS bug there. Then I came back to Columbus. They don't put respiratory therapists on their helicopters in central Ohio or anywhere in Ohio unless it's a pediatric helicopter, which wasn't even around back then.
Right.
And so only way I could get on the helicopter was become a paramedic. So a few years went by. A nurse of mine in the ER was like, hey, they've got a bridge program that they will utilize your respiratory therapy or my nursing degree, and we can become paramedics. I'm like, really? I'm like, let me look into that. And she bugged out and didn't end up not doing it. And I did it. I went one day a week for 10 weeks. I drove an hour, one each way to go to classes. And it was really cool because it was all adult professional healthcare people already, nurses, PA. There was a PA in there, another respiratory therapist. And it was great because we all basically just taught ourselves. When it was the airway time, I'm like, all right, everybody gather around. Let me teach you about airway. And then and there was a moderator, there was a education, but it basically prepped us for the exam, because it's a little bit different exam than the respiratory exam or the nursing exam. So just ended up getting that and became a paramedic, and then got recruited right out of the ER by some people that found out that I was a paramedic, and worked them both for a little bit. I'd worked both jobs for a little bit. And then about a year into EMS, I got into sales, and I did sales and EMS for 9 years.
Wow.
And so I was able to sell what I used. I used the things that I was selling. So I was very familiar with it. And I kind of got the bug of when I was in sales, the products that I had weren't even, I never sold them. They
Right.
sold themselves, and I just trained. And every single time I trained, there was someone else in the room that didn't have it yet because it was such new technology, and it was life-saving technology and life-changing technology that I was very, very lucky to be a part of and proud of to bring that to market with my company. But
All of that with the family.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Well, the good news is my territory was pretty small. I only had like the southern half of Ohio, so it was I'd get off work, jump on the road, go, go make calls or go train. A lot of it was actually training in the
uh-huh.
evenings,
Yeah.
just because, that's when fire departments, a lot of volunteer fire departments can get together, and hospitals, like every single hospital in my territory, every single EMS truck in my territory, all ended up getting this product.
Yeah.
And it was pretty, I'm pretty proud of it, pretty proud to know that I helped bring it to market, and it's like the standard of care. Like
Nice.
like if somebody doesn't have this in their hospital or in their EMS system, they're clueless, right? Because it's like it's almost as common as CPAP and I represented CPAP too, but it was just one of those things, or emergency CPAP, which is totally different than if anybody's listening and has CPAP at home. It's not the same machine. It's completely different for emergency CPAP, but different, but the same, same concept, just different machine. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, so I mean, that's where I kind of got the education bug from. I when my son was and my daughter was in high school, I would volunteer every time I could get a chance to be a chaperone, and chaperone marching band and hockey and cheerleading. And, with my daughter with cheerleading, yeah, my daughter was the cheerleader. My son was the hockey player. No, not that there's anything. She should have been a hockey player. She's so dang tough. She's tougher than my son. I'm like, you're way more tougher than Carter. Why don't you play hockey?
That's awesome. But yeah, so all of that, I mean, that is just really busy and, on the go and everything else. And so family life could possibly suffer during all
Oh,
of
it
that.
did.
And that's, the heart of our bringing education home is helping families understand how can you handle different situations in life? How can you learn from experiences? And one of the reasons we wanted you to come on is to talk about more of that. Is like, how did you handle being a full-time sales and EMS and the family and back and forth? And
Yep.
what kind of happened with that? Was that easy
It was
going up
No,
and
not really. The good news is, my wife is also in the healthcare field,
Mhm.
and we wanted kids early. Like I got married at 28, and I'm like, let's go, let's go. I'm 28, let's go. She was 26, she was, that old scene from my cousin Vinny, my biological clock is ticking. So she wasn't quite that way, but that's a funny scene when we think about it. We
Yeah.
both wanted kids pretty darn early. I mean, we were on, I mean, I think we were basically our year anniversary. She was already pregnant
Yeah.
with Carter. We got married in 2000
Right.
May and had a baby in October of 01.
Yeah.
So, it was one of those things where that's just what we were, and that that became our life.
Yeah.
And, I mentioned it on the summit yesterday. We would do in the hospital. She worked night shift, I worked day shift.
Mhm.
We would pass the baby in the halls if we had a shift that overlapped. So sometimes we can do it with hospital settings. It was 12-hour shifts. So there was days where I could work 3 and then she could work the back 3, but it was still very rare to see my wife, because whether it be opposite shifts or opposite work schedules,
Mhm.
it was, but we never wanted to do that daycare. We never wanted to have babysitters. Only people that ever babysit our kids were family,
Mhm.
and then us. So when it comes to like when they started getting older and into things, and then back then I was only hospital. I wasn't EMS yet.
Right.
Carter, I remember I was trying to break into sales, and I left respiratory and went and sold doors and windows because I also put myself through college putting in doors and windows with my dad. So I knew a lot about that industry, and I went and sold those for about a year. And 9/11 hit, and I looked at my boss and I'm like, "Hey, I got to go. I got to go to New York. They need help. I'm not held down by anything. I'm not at a hospital. I don't have a schedule right now because I'm working here." And
Right.
everything just came to a halt. I mean, if you guys
Yeah.
remember back then,
Oh, yeah.
we had everybody canceling orders, and and he told me the smartest thing. He's like, "Kyle," he goes, "You got a brand new son coming in a month." He's like, "Don't you dare drive to New York." And that was the smartest thing I ever heard, because we all now know what happened. Too many of us went to New York to help, and they didn't have anything to do with us. There was nothing to help with, you know. They didn't know how to handle the people. They didn't know where to feed them. They didn't know where to let them go to the bathroom. They had issues, right? So when it comes to the things that, you know, back to your question, sorry, I got off a little tangent there, but you know, how did we make it work? We just kind of we share parented, right? It was, you know, we were married, but it kind of seemed like we were, you know, co-parenting, which we were, but we always focused on that. Like, I went on a lot of guys' trips before I got married. That kind of stuff stopped for the most part, you know, very few and far between. Me and my wife's mentality was, this is the most important 18 years of our life right now. So we dedicated ourselves you know, to just basically throwing ourselves into raising our kids. And then when they started getting into, you know, they were both t-ball and soccer when they were little, and, you know, whatever. And I never pressured them. Hey, what do you want to do? There's this sport, there's this sport. You know, I played football all the way throughout, and my son, I offered it up to him. He played for 1 year. He got hit and was like, you know, I don't like that. And then never played football again. Right. Which sucked, because he was really good. Like, he was actually really, really good at football. And then he got hit with a baseball, one of a kid pitch, and he got hit with a baseball, not in the head, thank goodness. But and he was like, ever since that ruined his batting. You know, he was a great little baseball player, outfield and stuff like that, but it ruined his batting. He got hit by a ball and just was like, and so he came to us and said, I want to start playing hockey. And then go, what position does he play when he starts playing hockey?
Goalie?
After getting hit by a baseball, he starts playing goalie.
Well, again,
you
got all the pads. You're not.
Got all the pads. He became a really good goalie. He ended up doing high school goalie and travel goalie when he was a little bit younger, and then ended up playing for Bowling Green State University club for a couple of years. So, and now he plays adult league. You know, he's 22 years old, and, you know, still trying to figure things out. But just like any new 22-year-old person nowadays, they're all still trying to figure things out, because it's such a weird world.
He doesn't like football and he doesn't like baseball, so he plays hockey, which is football, baseball on ice.
Right. And he's really good at it. And like, he's not much of an athlete, other than, you know, as he got older, his skills for like some of the athletic stuff kind of dwindled, but the hockey skills raised. So you wouldn't know it, going out and throwing a football with him, that he was such a good hockey player, because he gets on the ice and he's poetic and he can skate backwards and forwards. And it's amazing. So I can't even dream of skating as good as he does. But
what I love about what you were just talking about is that you kind of let the kids kind of drive where they wanted to go,
Right.
what they wanted to do. You offered the experiences, but then they basically chose. And, you know, you let them, they played for a good enough time to know if it was a good fit or not. And then after the year or the season or whatever, then you let them change, because you want to make sure that they're doing that completion task, right? Help them understand the commitment and the loyalty that's needed in life and everything. So that was really, really good parenting. Good. You know, what I would, coach parents on is like, try this, think about this.
One of the things that you said that I really liked too was, when you had kids, you and your wife said this is the important thing, right? So most parents, most people want to get married and have kids, and then they have kids, and it's like, oh, I had a kid, now I'm all done. It's like they think that having the kid is the important part, but that's not. It's the 18 years that's the important part. And so thank you for understanding that and seeing that, because right now so many people have kids for themselves instead of being themselves for the kids.
Right. Yeah. And, and luckily, I married my wife straight up. I will 100%. I've never detoured on one. She's beautiful. I totally married up, but, but that wasn't number one. The number one was when I first started dating her. Maybe it was the second year I was dating her. She was a nanny, and I saw her with two small children of someone who hired her. She worked at a daycare center, and somebody from the daycare center hired her for the summer to nanny. And they were both car seat kids. So they were 4 and 2, maybe. No, I think the one kid was a newborn.
Yeah.
He was a newborn. And being the boyfriend, and met those people, and I'd go to, get-togethers with them. She was a nanny. They'd invite me too, and they were totally comfortable with me being around. And I got to see, I got like a view into how, if I married this girl, how my life would be. with kids. And I saw that as a 26-year-old, right? And so it was like a no-brainer to me, it wasn't, we came back, we found each other we broke up a couple of times. It just, nothing ever felt right. Nobody else felt right because it was still in my mind. I had a pretty good parents. Not pretty good. I had darn good parents. My brothers and sisters, maybe not so much. I was the youngest of four. It was a totally different world 8 years after my closest sibling. And we had the same biological parent, but knowing some stories that I've heard, they had a different mental parent, right? And I appreciate it. I appreciate my mom and dad cleaning their act up. But because it's the 70s.
So, cool psychobabble stuff. It's like every cell in your body is different after 7 years. So your bones take the longest time, but every cell in your bones are different after 7 years. So no, you did not have the same parents as your brothers did, because every single
7
cell
years later.
was different. Okay. Yeah, there you go. That's a good. I didn't know that little tidbit. Yeah. I didn't know that tidbit. That's a good one. But yeah, so it was just one of those things. We dove into our kids. We were very active. We were very we wanted to, with my son in marching band, we became chaperones. And I'm telling you that when we stopped being chaperones for his marching band and we knew there wasn't any more, it was tough. I mean, it was heartbreaking because I'm like, it wasn't that I loved watching him, but I did. I loved watching. He was a big bass player, and watching him was so entertaining because he was so fun and so energetic and so awesome at it. But I got to know 276 kids on the marching band that they would come to me, "Hey, Mr. Goodknight, I got this little injury," or, "Hey, Mr. Goodknight, I'm not feeling too good at band camp in 905-degree weather." I mean, I became, I was kind of extended my service to the band for 3 years. Actually, I ended up going into a fourth year. The director asked me to come back after my son graduated and to be a part of band camp because that was the year after COVID. The 2 years after, they did no band camps during COVID, and then the 1 year. So it was a little bit spread out. I did one more after that. After my son graduated, I did one more, but it was 2 years after COVID started, and they got people back into the regular band camp. And I was one of the only parents that still knew how to do stuff at that specific camp. And it was all new faces and a couple of kids. They were only freshmen back when my son was a senior. So it was one of those things where it was like, yeah, I'll come and help chaperone, even though I don't have a kid there. I was already approved for all the, the school district stuff. So I was like, yeah, let's just do it. So, and that felt good because I got to get one more, So
I would like to, so we are kind of getting a little short on time. So I would like to get into your passion project, what you're really passionate about right now and what you're really trying to help people with, because we should do that before we end. So people know what.
Absolutely. So right now, as you heard earlier, I'm a paramedic. I had a somewhat of a post-traumatic stress incident. I don't go as far as saying disorder because it didn't get that far because I caught it in time. But I had a situation that I was a part of, and a run that I was a part of that messed me up, right? And this was in EMS. I mean, in the hospital setting, I saw crazy stuff. I mean, like, wow, humanity, like, what the heck? I've saw some crazy stuff in the hospital. I've seen some crazy stuff, as a medic too. But so basically, I got this little what I call blindside. I got kind of blindsided by this wave of weird emotions and depression about an incident that actually I found out only a couple of months ago that I had an incident when I was a child, when I was in Cub Scouts, that someone succumbed to carbon monoxide in my group, and it didn't he didn't die from it, but he was very, very mentally disabled after that. And I think I've always been scared to death of that. So any carbon monoxide runs, I've always felt a little weird, but then the two that I had pretty much back to back were devastating. And it affected my family a little bit because my daughter actually knew one of the girls that was in the house. So it was one of those things where, wow, this is one of those that's really close to home. So when I came on the back side of that, I got some, luckily enough, I had a good mentor that said, "Hey, Kyle, you don't look right. You don't feel right. You're not acting right. I need you to go get some help." And so I did. I didn't deny it. I'm like, okay, I'll go talk to somebody. So I got on the back side of it, and I'm sitting there in an EMS lecture one day, big conglomerate. Somebody's up there talking about airway again or whatever it was. Like, man, and that's when I got the idea. I'm like, well, one, I'm an educator. Two, I've got some experience now with stuff that we need to know about as first responders. So basically, I kind of created in my head back then, it was 5 years ago, a first responder mental health lecture. Well, fast forward to about 6 months ago, it's not longer a lecture, it's a full-blown course. And I have different modules. The talk we were on yesterday, I kind of sprinkled a little bit about the family first module, where we talk about families of first responders in healthcare. And my goal is to go to be in front of as many first responders as I can, not only new students, existing people, or the people that are maybe in crisis. I have no problem with, if my talk or my discussion finds somebody in crisis and we can get them help, then I'm down with it. But I'm going to have a big focus in the beginning, getting into the schools, getting into the academies. I found out that they do very little mental health training in those. I didn't have any as a respiratory therapist, and I had zero as a paramedic, right? When I first started, but that was 19 years ago when I became a paramedic, and 23 years ago before when I became a respiratory therapist. So 26 years ago, sorry, man, time flies. So it's one of those things where I have the unique ability to get up in front of people and talk about stuff I know. And as I'm building this course, I'm getting to know the brain health, the epigenetics about it. I have a module on stigma and how to, I didn't even know what the word stigma meant when I've heard it. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know the word stigma a year ago. I heard it in education. I heard it in training. I just never connected. I never looked it up. I didn't know what it was. And I finally looked it up. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's like almost every single first responder. We're too tough. Why do you have problems? You knew this was going to be this type of, career, blah, blah, blah. So there's a module on that. There's a module on self-care, self-mindfulness, the family first module, how to help the struggling coworker. So I'm really diving deep into building this, and it's become a major passion project that's taken once I started, it still took a couple of months to really get me motivated, because it was like too many things that I wanted to do. And I got a coach, working with the coach, try to narrow it down. And he's like, man, you got to make this shorter. You got to make this shorter. You got to make this shorter, because it's just, you got to really keep their attention. I'm like, oh, okay. So it's great. I'm glad I have a coach, but that's what I'm doing right now. I'm in the middle of all that, and, getting my message out now. Like yesterday was my first time ever speaking about it in public, that other than with my close friends. Yesterday was the first time I announced it to how many ever people were in that summit, right?
Exactly. Well, and that's one of the reasons why we want to bring you on our podcast, Bringing Education Home, because, we want the families to develop, but we also want to help those families who are in need. So all of our listeners who are the first responders, or in the high stress jobs, or in a place where they just don't think they can do anything about it, they need to hear stories like yours of, passing the baby in the middle of the hallway kind of thing, the people who have come out the other side. I think you told us yesterday that you've actually reworked and saved your marriage twice because of all the high stress and things like that.
Yep.
And so super, super important. And just if you give us one or two tips out of that family module to give our families to help them.
Sure. Yeah. The overall arching, part of the family module that I really want people to know is that we need to communicate. The one thing that I did, and I mentioned it yesterday in the summit, that I wrote my kind of like my marriage story down, right? And then as I wrote my story down from the beginning to nowadays, I noticed a pattern that when we weren't communicating as a family, not just husband and wife, but a family, things were bad. Like, so there was other stories that things weren't great with the kids, right? Especially in the tween years, and hormones and blah, it's like, I noticed that, man, when we weren't communicating, we were bad. We had arguments. We had, I almost got divorced once because I stopped communicating. It was the crazy cycle, if anybody knows what that is. And she's not doing something that makes me feel good, so I don't do something that makes her feel good. And it's just a crazy cycle, and it's a spiral. And so once we learned what the crazy cycle was, we can pull ourselves out of that now, and I mean, doesn't mean that we don't get close to the crazy cycle again with being busy and even now being empty nesters. It's a little bit nice that, we can like make plans and not have to go 7 different directions and split
Right.
each other in half to go do stuff. But the main thing is that open communication. Like, yesterday I had that workbook, and I'm willing to, let your listeners have that workbook. You can put it in the show notes. I'll send it to you,
Thank you.
if that's okay with you. That workbook, well, not workbook, it's a worksheet or two,
Mhm.
that basically opens, it's just a worksheet that asks pertinent questions of yourself, your spouse, and then your children. And then you work with your children age appropriately. If your child is a teenager and they can understand the words that are coming off the page, by all means, they can do it themselves. But
Yeah.
as they grow, you can always revisit it, and you can work with them. And I've got instructions specifically how to work with the child. The adult should understand the words that are on the questions, and how to express themselves, because what I think that does is it leads to, oh, I didn't know that's what you really like to do with me.
Mhm.
I didn't know that building Legos with you was something that you look forward to when I come home. And all I've done is I blew you off and went and took a shower and crawled up on the couch, right? And watched TV. If I would have stopped and for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, built Legos with you before you went to bed, that's something that you need. That's something that you feel is when we're closest, right? And if we can communicate like that with our kids, our spouse, ourselves as well, and they see what we like, and it's on paper, now we have a plan, right? I'm a paramedic. Everybody's like, well, how can you be a paramedic? Well, I got a plan. I got every single thing. I've got a plan. If it's a trauma, I got a plan. If it's a cardiac arrest, I got a plan. So when I go into that, I am cool, calm, and collected, right? I'm not all over the place. It's because we've got a plan. So what I'm basically, imploring people to do is to make a plan and start that line of communication. So when things do start getting crazy, you can recognize it, come back to the plan, and get focused on the family.
So I also do psychedelic integration coaching. So people who PTSD, trauma, reach the end, talk therapy is not working, they get desperate. A lot of people end up going into psychedelic treatments. The legal kind, like ketamine, or sometimes even like leaving the country for ayahuasca or some of the higher ones. And first responders, there's a lot because it's a really stressful job, and you do have to keep all of that stuff under wraps.
And
So
there's such a big stigma.
yeah,
Yeah.
the stigma.
Major
So I
stigma.
totally appreciate that you're actually trying to get in front of it.
Yes.
Right.
So,
I want to put myself out of I want to put myself out of lectures. If I
right.
could teach every new paramedic, first responder, firefighter, police officer, dispatcher, if I could get them all at the beginning of their career to utilize the tools that are inside of my course, then in 20 years, they don't need me anymore. Well,
Right.
but that's not, that's not feasible, but that's still okay.
Right,
If that's what were to happen.
you want your course to be like that equipment that you were selling.
Yeah.
It became so important that now every hospital unit just
Yep.
has it,
That's
because
a good point. I'm going to use that. Thank
and
you.
now you want your course to just be there because it's
Right.
that important
Yeah.
and it's that critical.
Yeah.
It
So
is. It is.
and actually, yeah, because you could take clients away from me, and the more clients you take away from me, the better, because
Well, you'll be retired by the time that all
I mean,
happens.
think
right.
Oh.
But again, a lot of the stuff that you do preventative sounds like it would also be very helpful for people who've already crossed over and need to come back. So
Come back,
Yep.
yeah.
at some point,
100%.
I would love to introduce you to Deanne, the head of
Yeah.
being to you, to maybe see if you can get some of your information into her stuff. So because it's first responders, she also works a lot with military.
Veterans,
So
yeah.
Military. Yeah.
very much in line with what you're doing is in line with her heart and her mission. So
Awesome.
I'm just glad I'm gonna
Yeah.
bring you two together somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I appreciate it.
that's kind
And
of
I
awesome.
want to bring us back to that plan that you were just talking about, that
Right.
free gift that's going to be for our families. Is that one of the things I heard you saying was that, when high stress jobs, in families who are on the go all the time, who are crossing in the night kind of thing, having a plan to be able to make the time you have with your children and with your family, making it high quality time,
Mm,
is so super important, because
crazy important.
sometimes when we don't have a lot of time, the quality time kind of replaces it a little bit, right? It
Absolutely.
really helps out.
Absolutely.
makes the communication go. And the other thing I want to mention about that was because you have a plan. I actually talk about one of the things is having routines and schedules and stuff inside the family. Give
Hmm.
your brain a break. So you're coming home, you're high stressed, you're whatever, you're coming off your shift. And if you have that plan, you know, oh, this child needs 10 minutes of quality Lego time. This child needs 20 minutes of reading a good book.
Right.
It's one less
You don't
thing
have
in
to
your
think. You
brain.
Worry about, right. You got to play your work, you plan your work and you work your plan, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I love that. And I hope our families really heard that, you know, make
Yeah.
sure you're making that plan. Of course, it's going to change over time. Your kids are
Of
going to,
course, you can revisit it, just print it
yeah,
off again,
but make sure that happens. Yeah, exactly.
And the main thing with that is it's just, we can all think it. We can all say, "Oh, I'm going to go talk to my wife or my kids tonight about it." But what this worksheet does is it puts something in your hands and tangible. And when we write things down, we all know this through NRP and all that stuff. We know that, or NLP, we know that when we write things down, they get cemented in our brains better. So we're not talking a little an app that you can go and that'd be great, but I want a piece of paper that we can put on the fridge. And
Yes.
then I could go over to it and be like, "Oh, you put something new up there, babe. Okay, great. You want to go to Disney next year? Okay, cool. Let's start making it. Let's start making those plans." Because we also talk about future plans too in that worksheet. So
When I hurt my head, one of the things I did is I did a lot of studies on or looking up brain studies and stuff. Um,
mhm.
I started doing memory
Yeah,
exercise stuff. For memory remembering names, one of the tricks that a famous guy used to do is he would have his hand in his pocket, and whenever he heard the name, he would pretend he had a pen in his pocket, and he would
write it
write
down.
the name over and over inside of his pocket on his
That's a
lip.
great idea.
And so by writing the name without just
Just put
it,
your
it, it
Yep.
finger.
so I've done that a couple of times. Like it was like I said,
Very
a
interesting.
pocket, and surprisingly it works,
It's
That's
easier to
amazing.
name. Yeah.
Yeah.
which is weird because I have a lot of problem with names anyway. But it works.
Oh, I'm right there with you, Bob. No, I'm just kidding. I know it's Herb.
This has been a wonderful conversation, Kyle. I am so glad we had you on our podcast and that you're able to share this with families. Before we go, is there anything else that you want to tell our families? And if they wanted to get a hold of you, do you have an email address or website or something that you can say out loud? And we'll also put in the show notes for
Yep.
them to get a hold of you.
See multiple ways to hear it so that they
Yep.
understand it, right? Multiple
Right,
points of contact.
exactly. Yeah, 3 to 7, right? Yep. So if you see it on the screen there, that's how you spell my last name. That's why I'm Kyle,
Mhm.
because my mom and dad named us Kenny, Kelly, Christy, and Kyle, all with K's, so people could remember to put the K in the middle of our last name. We're good knight in shining armor, not
I
good, not good nighttime as sleep. So that's a common misspelling when they're like, "I don't have you in my system." Well, put a K in the middle. They're like, "What do you mean?" Like good knight, like good knight in shining armor.
Yes.
I'm KyleGoodknight.com. I mean, you go into Google and just put Kyle Goodknight, spell it the way I spell it, and you're only going to find me. I'm the first 8 things on the page. Um, so
Awesome.
so yeah, KyleGoodknight.com. I do have an email. It's Kyle@GoodknightVO for voiceover .com, but because I'm also a voiceover actor as well. So that's something I didn't even talk about that.
I didn't get to. That's okay. Awesome. And
So
one last little nugget for our families. If you were talking to a family who was in distress right now because of the work schedule or something, what would you tell them?
focus on your mental health, because one of the biggest factors of destroying a family is if we have I learned this in our own therapy when we were in marriage counseling. Things can stop, abuse can stop, addiction can stop, mental health, if it's not treated, can't stop, right? So if you're not in treatment and you have a mental disability or even as low as depression, it weighs down the marriage and there's no way out of it, right? No way out of the bad part of it. So, and if you're in tune with your mental health, it makes my exercise easier to talk about your feelings and to talk about their feelings and open that up. Because, the one thing that, I was a 70s baby. We didn't talk too much, you know, families didn't do a lot of, yes, we ate dinner together and we did the high surface stuff, the 30,000 feet stuff. What's the weather? How's your day? What's your grades? Whatever. But it wasn't anything where we actually got to know one another in a
Yeah.
right way until much later in life when you get
We're
older.
both born in 1970, so we're
Yep.
both Gen
Yep.
Xers.
There.
Our
Yep.
stories are very
Same.
similar.
Yep.
So yeah, we grew up on our own. Our parents were always out of the house. You know,
Yep.
yeah. I would go weeks without seeing my parents, kind of, and just
Yeah. But yeah, so that's all I'd say is just, if, focus on your mental health, whether that be just self-care and self-understanding and, don't create your own stigmas about it. It's not it's not a badge of honor, and it's not something to be ashamed of.
Yeah.
You can,
Love it.
there's many things out there that help nowadays, more now than ever.
Yeah.
And we know more about it than ever.
Yeah.
One of the books I read recently showed that things were still coming out in like 2011 about our mental health and our brain health. And it's better now than it's ever been to get help.
yeah.
Awesome.
And something to consider is you don't have any feelings that somebody else doesn't have. The feelings that you have, everybody has those feelings.
At least
What's
at some
unique
point.
about you is how you get to those feelings.
Yeah.
So it's your story, it's your path, whatever that is, those feelings, everybody has them. You're not alone. Your situation is not unique. There is somebody else that is going through it, that has been through it, that found a way through it, and that can possibly help. So
Exactly.
if you're in there and you think, oh my God, this has never happened to anybody else, I'm the only one like this, I'm all alone, that's not true. There's somebody that's going through it, that's maybe a little farther ahead, that can reach back a hand and take you one step, and then somebody else can take you one step. So
Yeah.
listen, go for it. Don't
Yep.
don't just sink into that. There is help.
Right. Exactly.
All right. Family, friends, listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been a wonderful discussion. We were so pleased to meet Kyle and have him talk with us today. Take those gold nuggets that have been sprinkled throughout the episode, share it with others, leave us a review, and we hope to see you all on the next episode. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you, Kyle. It's been a great
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Bye for now.